Expert mode refers to a further set of controls that you can access on the local level. So let's go to period, for instance, and see its local controls. If you enable expert mode, now you will see a new set of rows with a bunch of new parameters. So this refers to signals. If you press on this box, you will enable a signal to control the parameter. In this case, that will be an LFO. That is the default. We see here something about syncing, but we will skip this for now, and let's focus on source and Hertz. If you are familiar with LFOs, this should be very intuitive because source is simply the waveform, for example, a Gaussian waveform, a square waveform, or a ramp. Let's use for now the ramp, which is the one that is easiest to understand. Hertz refers to the period of the waveform. So 1 Hertz equals to 1 period in 1 second. So 1 full cycle of the waveform. If I put it on 1, you will see that it takes 1 second until the ramp is completed. Okay, that should make perfect sense because it's nothing very outside of the way of thinking that we have in TouchDesigner. Now let's focus on the syncing. Syncing, it refers to the reset of the phase of this waveform. So if I move from internal to manual, there's a further control that allows me to retrigger the phase. So if I do this, it will start again whenever I press it. The internal, it just simply does internally what it should do, so we have no control over the phase. But if we go to these other modes, then we can synchronize this to something. If I try to choose, for example, beat, then TDMorph will complain and will tell me there is no transport attached. Okay, so we need to pass a transport to TDMorph. And when you click on TDMorph and you see the parameters and you go to inputs, you see that there's an input for transport. So in here, we need to pass a chop. But what chop exactly? So the chops that we can drop and that are supported by default on TDMorph are the beat chop and the Ableton Link CHOP. So these two you can just drop there, and TDMorph will automatically ask them to reveal the channels that are necessary, which are bar, beat, sixteenths, and BPM, and use those channels to create a clock, which you can see on the top here now. So as soon as you plug one of those chops, this will get created for you, and now you can sync things to this clock. So the same happens if I put Ableton here, the Ableton Link CHOP. It asks for the right channels and those get created for me and it all works. That is not to say that only these two are supported. In reality, anything that you pass here that has these channels will be supported, will work, as long as it has these channels, of course. So you can synthesize your own clocks if you want, or you can use something like TDAbleton, which now has native support to be linked very easily with TDMorph as well. Thank you, Derivative, and Ivan in particular for that. Okay, let me now show you how this works. And for that, let's use the beat chop. So if you're not familiar with the beat chop is simply taking the tempo from TouchDesigner, which is specified in here. And yeah, that information gets passed directly to TDMorph. We can see it here. If you want to sync things, all you need to do is choose a mode. So I have chosen the beat mode. And whenever you're going to choose here a different beat, it's going to quantize it. So it's going to wait until the beat reaches the number 1 beat to sync the phase. So let me see. Now I want that the full cycle of my ramp is met in 2 beats. So I'm going to press here 2. And as you can see, it waits until it reaches the first beat after those counts to synchronize it. And it does so because we want it to be absolutely sure that we're hitting things at the right time and they have the right duration. So you can put here, for example, a 3, and it will now wait until we reach that. And you can see now that it takes 3 beats to have 1 cycle. Let's go back again to 1. Okay. We can do the same with bars. So now it will take a whole bar to complete the cycle. So that is 4 beats. Or you can say 2 bars. Right? So this allows you to create synchronized events over long periods of time. You can also choose sixteenths. and by default those are 4/16, which is equivalent to 1 bit. But if we put 1 or 2/16, that will be much faster. Right? Okay, hopefully all this related to LFO is intuitive enough, because it's not so foreign to what we're used to work with inside TouchDesigner and in music in general. There is one more signal that we can use in expert mode. To access that, you can flip this value here. It is LFO now, but if you press on this button, it switches to be pattern. Patterns are an idea I took from the SuperCollider programming language. I reverse engineered that to work inside TouchDesigner because I think that is a really nice way to generate values for computer graphics. So let me try to explain you what patterns are. We see that when we select a pattern, our sources have changed. The syncing possibilities remain the same and they are valid as I explained before. So our sources are now P and some word, so Pseq, Prand, PXRand, etc. Pseq stands for pattern sequence, and the sequence is this field in here. If you notice, the values that I wrote in this sequence are the ones chosen on every change of the syncing state. So let's change it to be 1. So every bit, a new value will be generated in order in this sequence. And I type sequences by typing a number and then a space and another number, just like you do in a normal TouchDesigner field. So as you see, every time I type a new string here, it gets automatically updated and the parameter chooses that value from the pattern. So this is very dynamic. The patterns, they have two different modes, the raw and the smooth. Raw means simply instantaneous change, so you can just change between the states. And smooth means interpolate between those chosen states, so it's a smooth transition. This first box is the effect, and the second box is the width of that effect. And internally is just a Gaussian filter. Let me explain you another pattern. Let's move to Prand. Prand stands for random pattern. So what it's going to do now, let me select raw so it's more clear, and let's make this a little bit slower. We have a sequence which is comprised of this. It's just a list of values. So Prand simply selects one of those values at random on every call of the syncing. It's very intuitive, I hope. Like before, whenever you type something, it will just work because it will update it on the next call. So that is just fine. There are various other patterns which I encourage you to explore. They are very easy to understand once you know how this system works, and I think can add a lot to how we are used to generate values in TouchDesigner. Alright, with this I conclude the expert mode. In the next tutorial I will explain how to do mappings, that being the OSC and MIDI mappings. There is a whole brand new system which I am excited to show you, and which allows you to control every single parameter in the TDMorph interface with MIDI or OSC signals. See you there.